Namaskar and welcome. Today I'll read you an excerpt from a book that has had quite a deep impact on me. The first time I read this, I was 19 years old, and ever since I have read this book a few times. Um, the book is one of the two cult books that a lady by the name of Ayn Rand wrote. This book goes by the name The Fountainhead, and there's another equally successful book, which goes by the name of Atlas Shrugged. Today, I'll read you a passage which I feel has a lot of lessons for us. But before I read you the passage, I think I need to give you the context or a little bit of context. So this passage is about the early years of a man called Gail Wynand, who was born in abject poverty, but he rose to become a very, very powerful media mogul. And this passage is about his early years. Gail Wynand often went for a walk through the best streets of the city. He felt no bitterness against the world of wealth, no envy, no fear. He was simply curious, and he felt at home on the Fifth Avenue just as anywhere else. He walked past the stately mansions, his hands in his pocket, his toes sticking out of a flat soled shoe. People glared at him, but it had no effect. He passed by and left behind the feeling that he belonged to this street, and they didn't. He wanted nothing for the time being except to understand. He wanted to know what made these people different from those in his neighborhood. It was not the clothes, the carriages, or the banks that caught his notice. It was the books. People in his neighborhood had clothes, horse carriages, and money, but they did not read books. He decided to learn what was read by the people on the Fifth Avenue. One day, he saw a lady waiting in a carriage at the curb. He knew she was a lady. His judgment on such matters was more acute than the discrimination of the social register. She was reading a book. He leaped to the step of the carriage, snatched the book, and ran away. It was a volume of Herbert Spencer. He went through quite an agony trying to read it to the end. He read it to the end. He understood one quarter of what he read. But this started him on a process which he pursued with a systematic, fetch-cleansing determination. Without advice, assistance, or plan, he began reading an incongruous assortment of books. He would find some passage which he could not understand in one book, and then he would get another book on the same subject. He branched out erratically in all directions. He read volumes of specialized erudition first and the high school primer later. There was no order in his reading, but there was order in what remained of it in his mind. I want to carry on reading this, but I'll have to stop. If you really have been enticed by this passage, I'll highly encourage you to actually buy the book and read it. But let's now try to understand or try to see what are the key things that we can learn from this. From my perspective, I've learned two or three main things from this. The first important thing that I've learned is that if you really want to grow out of your current situation, you do not have an alternative but to read books. Now, why? I feel that when we are in whatever setup we are in, and if we are not happy with that setup and we want to grow out of that setup, then we need to change the mindset that we bring to anything. But normally, if you look at all the interactions that you would have with people who are like you, those interactions are like echo chambers where there is a constant reinforcement of our beliefs, our values, our approaches. So it's like there are two people who meet who have a similar mindset and they just reinforce each other's beliefs rather than questioning it or pushing each other to grow. So, and most of our engagements are of that nature. So, if you really want to challenge your mindset, grow, I do not think there is any alternative but to read books. Now, why? And there again, when it comes to reading books, you may want to exercise discrimination. You may want to read books that are to the point that I mentioned earlier that have stood the test of time because that's a very very good test. So read classics, and I know they are difficult, like it was difficult for this guy, um, but that difficulty indicates that you are really growing. So don't read books that are just in fashion right now. Read books that have actually withstood the test of time, and I've been read by people who have really given a lot of deep, concerted effort into thinking and writing that book. So that's my advice number one. So the advice number one is if you want to grow out of your current situation, and I think one of the most important or one of the most potent instruments that you can use is to read books written by people who are at places where you want to be, or who are pioneers in the subject which you want to master. And if that process is painful, then by definition it is the process of growth. So that's point number one. Point number two is that when you read, you have to have the intellectual integrity, honesty to constantly check whether it's actually getting distilled into your own mind in the manner it should. And that's where the order of reading is not that important. What is more important is whether you are consciously making the effort to understand the subject. And if you do it, this will automatically happen. But it requires intellectual honesty, it requires integrity. And there are a few tricks that I can teach you which will help you with that process, which I'll maybe cover in another video. But the key point that I want to take away in this video is that just don't do it as a process. Just don't read books or read classics because someone has told you to do it and you think it's useful. I think it's much better than not doing it. But when you do it, constantly keep on checking what is the key message or the key thing that I've learned from it. And if you do these two things, I think you are on the right track. That's it for today. Thank you.